There's something almost unbelievable about watching someone rise from nothing, literally nothing, to a life most people only see in magazines. Imagine growing up in a cramped home built from scrap wood and rusted metal, sharing one small space with an entire family, and wondering if life will ever change. Now imagine that same person years later stepping into a gleaming condo lobby, wearing clothes that actually fit, and signing papers for a home worth millions. How does that transformation even happen? And more importantly, what's the moment that flips everything? In this video, we're diving into the real-life journeys of 4 Filipino celebrities who climbed all the way from squatter areas and slum communities to multi-million peso homes, condos, and even full-blown real estate empires. Their stories are emotional, shocking, and packed with moments that completely altered their destinies. Moments that turned struggle into opportunity and opportunity into fortune. Before we start, make sure to hit subscribe so you don't miss any of our uploads, especially videos like this that dive deep into the stories behind success. When you look at the Philippines today, there are only a handful of people whose life story feels almost cinematic. Painful in the beginning, unbelievable in the middle, and inspiring in the end. And the first person on this list lived a childhood so harsh that most people wouldn't even believe it if it weren't documented everywhere. Isko Moreno didn't just grow up poor. He grew up in Tondo, one of the toughest, most crowded places in Manila, an area where children learn early that life will not hand you anything for free. His family lived in a tiny home squeezed between other makeshift houses, and most days were a battle just to eat. As a kid, Isko would run to the garbage trucks the moment they rolled in. While most kids were playing, he was digging through trash for leftover food, whatever restaurants had thrown out the night before. He'd collect anything edible, bring it home, and his mom would reheat it for the family. That was their version of groceries. But he didn't just pick through trash. He also worked as a pedicab driver, pedaling under the Manila heat at an age when most kids were still learning how to ride a bike. Every peso mattered. Every small chore meant the difference between another meal or another night going to sleep hungry. Yet even with all that hardship, something about him stood out. Maybe it was the way he carried himself. Maybe it was the confidence he didn't even realize he had. Because one ordinary afternoon in Tondo, one of those days he probably thought would be just like all the others, a talent scout passed by. He noticed the skinny teenager hanging out by the canto and told him he should try auditioning for TV. It sounded ridiculous at first. How could a slum kid from Tondo end up on television? But the idea stayed in his head, and that one suggestion changed the entire trajectory of his life. Isko took a chance and showed up at the audition. Nervous, unsure, but hopeful. He had nothing to lose anyway, and somehow, that was enough. He landed a spot on That's Entertainment, suddenly going from garbage picker to someone who had a real shot in showbiz. It wasn't instant fame, but it was steady work. Steady paychecks that felt life-changing for a boy who once stretched 10 pesos for days. As his popularity grew, the pay improved. He started getting roles in films, gaining fans, and earning money he'd never even imagined. Instead of digging through trash for leftovers, he was now able to buy real meals, fresh, warm food that didn't come from someone else's waste. He began sending money home consistently, helping his parents, and slowly turning things around for his entire family. One of the most emotional moments in his career wasn't a big award or a major TV role. It was the day he finally moved his family out of the slums. For someone who grew up stepping over mud, trash, and puddles just to reach his front door, being able to buy a proper home was like stepping into a different universe. He didn't grow up dreaming of luxury. No fancy mansion, no dramatic real estate flex. What he wanted was simple. A home where his family could sleep safely, without leaking roofs, without fear of eviction, without noise from neighbors, separated by only one thin wooden wall. And he achieved it. That first house represented more than comfort. It was proof that even the most impossible circumstances could be rewritten. But what made his story even more powerful is what happened later in life. After showbiz, he entered politics, eventually becoming mayor of Manila. And one of the biggest focuses of his leadership? Housing. It was personal. After all, who understands the impact of safe, clean, dignified housing better than someone who grew up without it? Isko pushed for public housing projects, in-city relocation, and better living conditions for communities that reminded him of his own childhood. It was like his story had come full circle. From a boy scavenging for food to a leader who now built homes for thousands of families. His journey is proof of something powerful. When you give someone a chance, just one real chance, it can completely change what's possible. But Isko wasn't the only one who turned hardship into a life-changing breakthrough. Up next is someone whose story takes rags to riches to an entirely different level. Because unlike Isko, he didn't just buy a condo. He helped build one with his own name on it. Isko's rise from the slums to City Hall already feels like something out of a movie. But the next story takes that same grit and pushes it even further. Because while Isko escaped poverty through a talent scout's lucky discovery, this next figure clawed his way up through a lifetime of odd jobs, hustle, and a personality so loud and unforgettable that it eventually became his superpower. If Isko moved his family into a better home, this man took it a step further. He would eventually put his name on an actual building. Willie Revillame's childhood was marked by constant movement and instability. He was born in Cabanatuan, but early on, life pulled him from one place to another. Nueva Ecija, Angeles City, Caloocan. He lived with different relatives, grew up with very little money, and learned quickly that if he wanted something, he had to earn it himself. There was no steady allowance, no room full of toys, no backup plan. Just pure survival. As a kid, Willie did whatever he could to help his family. He sold newspapers on the street. He cleaned jeepneys, wiping off dust and mud for a few coins. He became a barker, shouting destinations at passing passengers and hoping they'd hop into the jeep he was promoting. When he had the chance, he performed on the streets, singing, joking, doing anything to grab attention and earn loose change. Every day felt like a grind, a constant hustle just to stay afloat. But even then, one thing about Willie stood out. He had this natural energy, a spark that made people look twice. Even when life kept throwing him around, he found a way to keep talking, keep joking, keep performing. That spark would become the foundation of his entire future. In his early adulthood, he found his way into showbiz, but not as a star. Not yet. He started as a drummer on television, often hidden behind bigger, more famous entertainers. He was the guy in the background, keeping the rhythm while others got the applause. But he didn't complain. He knew that if he stayed long enough, if he showed up every day, something good might come. And slowly, it did. His comedic timing, his charm, and his boundless energy caught the attention of producers. Soon enough, instead of just playing music, he was given the microphone. He became the funny sidekick, the guy who could hype up a crowd without even trying. Then came the turning point that changed everything: hosting. When Willie stepped into the role of a TV host, it wasn't just a job. It was the perfect match. His entire personality, his noise, his confidence, his quick jokes, his rapport with ordinary people finally had a stage big enough to contain it. Shows like Magandang Tanghali Bayan and later Wawawawi catapulted him into a level of fame that almost no other host had reached before. Suddenly, he wasn't just the sidekick. He was the face of the show, the main attraction, The guy Filipinos watched every lunchtime because he made them laugh, cry, and hope. And with fame came the paychecks. Massive ones. The kind that no one from his childhood neighborhood could have ever imagined. Willie didn't come from money, so he understood the value of every peso better than most. He didn't waste time. He invested. And not just in any business, he invested in real estate. His biggest flex? Will Tower. Right across ABS-CBN stands a 40-plus story condominium and mall development known as Will Tower. Sleek glass panels, polished marble interiors, private elevators, and unit prices reaching into the multi-millions. And at the center of it, literally and figuratively, was the kid who once cleaned jeepneys for coins. Imagine that contrast. A young Willie, barefoot, wiping mud off a jeepney, and the grown man, decades later, riding his private elevator to the top floors of a tower designed with his initials. It's the kind of transformation that feels unreal, almost too perfect to script, but that's exactly what happened. And what made it even more powerful wasn't the luxury, it was the symbolism. For Willie, real estate wasn't just an investment. It was proof of how far he had come. Proof that someone who started from the very bottom could actually build something permanent. Something tall enough to scrape the sky. Something that would outlive him. But his story doesn't end there. While his past was filled with instability, his success allowed him to give stability to others. Whether through jobs, giveaways, or life-changing prizes on his shows. He knew how it felt to have nothing, so he used his platform to give people a taste of hope. Willie's rise from street jobs to showbiz icon to real estate mogul is one of the most dramatic jumps in Filipino celebrity history. It's loud, bold, and unforgettable, just like him. But if Willie's story feels like a long, dramatic climb, the next one is different. It's quieter, built piece by piece and powered not by entertainment, but by business genius. Because the next figure didn't just buy condos, he built an entire housing empire. If Willie Revillame's rise felt like a loud, explosive climb powered by sheer personality, the next story is the complete opposite. This one moves quietly at first. Slow, steady, and almost unnoticed, no bright stage lights. No roaring studio audiences. Just a kid from Tondo who would one day build more homes than any celebrity, politician, or businessman in the country. If the first two stories were about escaping poverty, this one is about transforming it into an empire. Manny Villar was born in Moriones, Tondo, one of the most densely packed communities in Manila. His family lived in a small, rundown apartment that could barely fit all 9 children. Rent was cheap, but even cheap felt expensive when every peso had to be stretched to its limit. Unlike the showbiz arcs you've seen so far, Manny's childhood didn't involve talent scouts or auditions, just pure, harsh survival. His earliest memories weren't of toys or play. They were of early mornings in the market. Manny's mother sold shrimp and fish in Divisoria, and as a young boy, he was already helping her carry buckets of seafood, shouting prices to customers and learning the brutal rhythm of market life. He woke up before sunrise, worked before school, and returned after class to do it again. It wasn't glamorous, but it taught him something more valuable than money. It taught him how to work. And unlike many kids who grow up surrounded by poverty, Manny didn't see it as a trap. He saw it as motivation. When his father lost his government job, things got even tougher. The family had debt, bills, and 9 children to feed. Yet Manny didn't break. He studied harder. He pushed through. Eventually, he got into the University of the Philippines, one of the hardest schools in the country to enter, especially for someone from the slums. He graduated with degrees in business and accountancy, becoming a certified public accountant. That alone was already a huge victory for a market vendor's son. But Manny wasn't satisfied with simply landing a stable job. He wasn't built for that. He wanted more. So after a few years in the corporate world, he took a risk most people would be terrified to make. He left and started his own business. His first venture? A small sand and gravel company for construction supplies. It wasn't flashy, and it certainly didn't scream, "future billionaire." But Manny understood one thing people often overlook. Every city, every road, every building starts with raw materials. If you control the foundation, you control the growth. That little business opened the door to his next idea, a housing loan company helping ordinary Filipinos afford homes. And then came the move that would define his future, building houses himself. Manny saw a painful reality that most people ignored. So many Filipino families were living in cramped rentals, flood-prone communities, and overcrowded slums, just like he once did. And yet, affordable housing options barely existed. So he built them. One project turned into 5. 5 turned into 20. Soon the kid who once hauled shrimp buckets before sunrise was building entire subdivisions. He founded Camella Homes, which later became Vista Land and Lifescapes, a massive real estate group behind some of the country's largest housing developments and high-rise condos. This wasn't just success. This was transformation on a national scale. Suddenly, a boy from Tondo wasn't just buying a home. He was providing homes for millions of other families. And as the years went on, his projects stretched across the Philippines. Subdivisions, malls, commercial centers, and condo towers rising everywhere. Forbes began listing him as one of the richest Filipinos with billions in net worth. Not bad for someone who once worried about having enough for dinner. But what makes Manny Villar's story especially powerful in this video's theme is this. Manny didn't just escape his childhood environment. He rebuilt it into something better. He didn't just buy a condo. He built condo towers. He didn't just purchase one family home. He created entire communities. From a cramped apartment in Tondo to owning a real estate empire, that arc shows what can happen when opportunity meets discipline. And yet, even Manny's quiet, calculated rise isn't the final chapter of this video. Because the next story belongs to someone from a completely different generation. Someone who went through the same struggles but climbed even faster. A young girl who once lived in a squatter's area and ended up building her first house before she even became an adult. Up next, the Gen Z star who turned childhood hardship into a dream home long before most people even figure out what career they want. Manny Villar's story shows what decades of discipline, vision, and business strategy can build. But the next chapter is completely different. This one isn't about a long climb or a lifetime of trials. It's about a girl who started with almost nothing, yet somehow managed to build a dream home long before she was even old enough to vote. If Manny represents the slow grind, this next story is what happens when raw talent meets opportunity at the perfect moment. Proof that the rags to riches story isn't just for politicians and TV legends. It can happen to a kid with a dream too. Andrea Brillantes grew up in circumstances that were all too familiar to millions of Filipinos. She has openly shared that part of her childhood was spent in a squatter's area, a neighborhood where families live in makeshift homes cramped together, sharing thin walls, narrow alleys, and tiny spaces that barely fit a bed. For many kids, that kind of environment shapes a mindset of limitation. But for young Andrea, it did the opposite. It became fuel. Her family didn't have much, but what they did have was determination. Her father worked tirelessly, and even as a little girl, Andrea would help however she could. The lack of comfort, the tight spaces, the feeling of uncertainty, these things didn't break her. They sharpened her. Just like the others in this list, she knew what hard looked like early in life. Her break arrived earlier than almost anyone else's. At around 7 years old, Andrea started auditioning for roles in showbiz. She didn't come from an influential family. She didn't have connections. All she had was a spark, an expressive face, a natural charm, and a talent that producers couldn't ignore. She landed small roles first, usually playing the cute kid in teleseries, but every time she stepped in front of a camera, something about her just clicked. She wasn't just acting. She was absorbing, observing, learning, and little by little, the industry began to notice. Her big turning point came with her lead role in Annalisa. At such a young age, she carried an entire teleserie, something even adult actors struggled to do. But Andrea delivered. Her emotional depth surprised viewers, critics, and producers. She wasn't just a child actor. She was a star in the making. Then came the show that would change her life completely. Cadenang Ginto. As Marga, Andrea transitioned from child star to teen sensation. The show became a massive hit, dominating social media, spawning memes, and turning her into one of the most recognizable Gen Z stars in the country. The success of the series created the Gold Squad, a group she formed with Francine Diaz, Kyle Echari, and Seth Fettelin. Their YouTube channel exploded. Their vlogs gained millions of views. And suddenly, Andrea had not just one career, but several. Actress, influencer, content creator, and brand ambassador. The paychecks came fast. Endorsements rolled in. Campaigns stacked up. And Andrea, unlike many teens, handled her success with purpose. She saved, she planned. She visualized bigger things. Because behind the glitz of the industry, she never forgot where she started. That brings us to one of the most emotional milestones in her story. Her first house Andrea had dreamed of building her family a real home ever since she was 4 years old. And unbelievably, she made it happen before she turned 18. The house, terracotta-toned, warm, and beautifully designed, became a symbol of everything she fought for. Her room alone took up an entire floor, a far cry from the cramped space she grew up in. She walked through the construction site with wide eyes, realizing she was giving her family something she never had growing up. Comfort, stability, and space, but her story didn't stop there. A couple of years later, she made another bold move. Andrea bought her own home. Independence, privacy, a place she could design around her own tastes and personality. At an age when most people are still struggling to pick a course in college, Andrea was already signing real estate papers. Her transformation is one of the purest examples of modern-day rags to riches in Filipino showbiz. A kid who once shared tiny rooms in a squatter community now wakes up in a home she paid for with her own talent. A teenager who once dreamed of just having her own bedroom now owns multiple properties. Andrea's rise isn't just inspiring. It's a reminder that hardship doesn't discriminate by age, and neither does success. And now that we've seen all 4 stories, 4 childhoods marked by struggle, 4 breakthroughs, 4 life-changing upgrades, it's time to look at the bigger picture. What do their journeys reveal? What patterns do they share? And what can someone watching this right now learn from all of it? Looking at these 4 stories side by side, a pattern becomes impossible to ignore. Every one of them began in places where hope was small, resources were scarce, and dreams felt almost impossible. That from the slums of Tondo to cramped squatter homes to childhood shaped by survival, they all started at the very bottom. But somewhere along the way, each of them found a single opening, a break, a chance, a moment that shifted everything. And instead of letting that moment slip away, they pushed, they worked, and they turned it into something much bigger. Isko used his break to lift his entire family out of poverty. Willie transformed his hustle into a tower with his own name on it. Villar turned market struggles into an empire of homes. And Andrea turned childhood hardship into a future she built with her own hands, before she was even an adult. Their journeys remind us that where you come from doesn't decide where you end up. It only decides how hungry you'll be to change it. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like it, leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe so you don't miss any of our future uploads.